let's get to the main event here. First thing I'm going to do is there's quite a significant amount of material that I have taken from sources other than the text. So I think I'm going to cover what you're going to need to know, the kind of important things that you need to focus your study on. First thing, and you remember this was probably in the first couple of 3 weeks, we spent time on these 9 themes about crime and criminal justice and the criminal justice system, okay? These are kind of themes that come out of research that I have done, my own experience in the criminal justice system, working there, and so forth. What I am likely to ask you would be to, first of all, identify, and then secondly, explain, say, like 6 or 7 of those 9 themes. Okay, so it'd be up to you as to which ones you want to write on. But and I would think, you know, you're basically for most of those talking about, I wouldn't think any more than a paragraph, if that much. But giving me showing me that you understand 6 or 7 of those 9 themes. Okay. Now, please understand that, for instance, I used some documentation for a few of those themes. Like, for instance, for the one about crime as diverse behavior, I gave you that crime typology. Person-to-person violent crime, person-to-person property crime, all that. You wouldn't have to put that in that first theme. That would be a standalone question. You know, I might ask you about, you know, please identify the crimes in the crime typology and give me some examples of each one, or give me one example of each one, okay? But that's going to be, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you don't need to go into all that detail about that first theme. That would be a separate standalone question. Same way, the last of the themes says the criminal justice system cannot solve the crime problem. Well, that's the theme, and the criminal justice funnel, you remember we talked at length, I gave you that criminal justice funnel, that would simply be documentation for that 9th theme, okay? Hello? Anyone home out there? Yes?
So, in our description, would you just want us to be like, Uggs is evident in the CJ funnel?
Yeah. You don't have to go into all the numbers and a whole lot of detail about the criminal justice funnel. Okay. Now, when it comes time for what would be a separate standalone question of the criminal justice funnel, then you do need to go into more significant detail. Okay? All right. Please feel free to stop me like you're doing and ask questions about it. All right. You'll remember also that on theme number 7, which had to do about the criminal justice players being in the business of negotiating what is crime and who is the criminal and blah, 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 I used as kind of an example of that little hypothetical about the man in the garage, okay? Remember that? So, again, that's the same deal. You don't have to give me that entire scenario about the man in the garage, okay? All right. What else? All right. Any questions on that? That's a big part of what we've done this semester. That's probably a couple of 3 weeks of work, or maybe even a little bit more. Yeah.
Could you repeat the 9 themes one more time?
Okay. First one was the diverse nature of the behavior we call crime. And I'm not going to go into all the detail that I gave you about that. The second one says, therefore, beware of anyone espousing the solution to the crime problem. Solution will likely be incrementally through numerous small changes. All right, that was number 2. The third one says that it's easier to identify street crime and that therefore we get more of it. Okay, and again, there was lots of explanation to explain what all of these things mean and why they're important. The fourth one had to do with the political nature of crime, and you remember I gave several examples of that. We talked about creation of law studies. We talked about the Harrison Narcotics Act. We talked about the St. Louis level of rape incidents, and the police department's kind of doubling over of that. All right. All right. Okay, if I'm correct here, I think we're probably at number 5, and that was the one about the myths and mythology of crime and criminal justice. What we know that just ain't so. All right, and I gave a whole host of examples of that. Yes, ma'am.
So, like, for the test, you just want to, like, for 5, you want us to just be like, we have a lot of misconceptions about crime? Is that just basically what you want from us? Or, like, can you give examples, like?
Yeah, some examples would help. Just make sure that you are giving me a good rendering of the meaning and importance of that particular theme. Okay? Number 6, as I calculate, was kind of the corollary to number 5, and it says, therefore, we need to critically and analytically think about the crime problem. Policies must be based on hard data, not ideology. Number 7 says that the criminal justice players are in the business of determining what is the crime and who is the criminal. They do this through a process of interpretation, negotiation, and storytelling. Okay? 8 simply says that discretion is pervasive in the criminal justice system. And finally, as I mentioned before, 9 says that the criminal justice system cannot solve the crime problem. And part of my documentation for that was the criminal justice funnel, which, as I said, I would ask as a separate question. Okay? All right, good. Now listen, we gotta kind of move things along though a little bit here. All right. something else you're going to need to know. The difference between the legal and social construction of crime. You are also going to need to know the 3 sources of criminal justice data. And please remember, official data, UCR is just one kind of official data. There's prosecutorial data, there's courts data, there's probation parole data, there's corrections data. That's all official data. It's not just UCR. And the category is official data. Second one, the category is victimization studies. And as we said, NCVS is one kind of victimization study. It's very well known, it's very popular, it's the best one, but it's just one kind. The category is victimization studies. And finally, the last one was self-report studies. All right, and you guys will need to know at least a couple of the pluses and minuses, the good and bad of those different sources. Be able to give me at least a couple for each source. All right, good, 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 good. Okay, you are going to need to explain to me what the criminal justice wedding cake is. And this is going to be, at least in some amount of detail. We need to know what those 4 layers are. I need to know at least 1 or 2 characteristics of each of those 4 layers. That, for instance, the celebrated cases, and as an example, there are cases where the victim or offender is a celebrity, or they may be simply a case that was a precedent-setting case. Remember, I gave you examples like, what was the Gideon versus Wainwright, or Miranda versus Arizona, those cases that changed the way we do business in the criminal justice system, okay, or any other ones you want to come up with. Okay, you need to know the purpose of the criminal justice wedding cake. And the purpose is it gives the criminal justice players an easy, efficient, impersonal way of processing lots and lots of cases. Okay, next thing you're going to need to know on that wedding cake is the 3 factors that the players use to distinguish the 2nd level from the 3rd level, the serious felonies from the lesser felonies. Okay? Sure. You're going to need to know the 3 factors that distinguish serious felonies from lesser felonies. All right? which would, as you know, be the second layer from the third layer of the wedding cake. All right, we keep marching on. All right, that is really the primarily outside the text material. And you remember, a lot of this was much more the kind of, we mixed in the social, economic, political factors and so forth with the legal factors. The work we did in the text was a much more legalistic kind of rendering of what the various requirements are and how we go through the criminal justice system, okay? Most of that is found in Chapter 5, and I'm going to, there's a whole lot of detail. Part of the reason I want to do this review is to let you kind of focus on what I view as the important parts. So, you're going to need to know the organization of the federal and state courts. Remember, they're a tripartite level. Happily for you, the levels are pretty similar. You need to kind of understand about the lower level courts or the fact-finding courts. The appeals courts are appeals based only on matters of the law. The facts are set at the trial court, and then only matters of law can be appealed. So, for instance, things like, you didn't have adequate counsel, or there was a bad search in the case, or some particular hearing was not given to you in a timely fashion. Any of those matters of law, primarily the things that you find in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments of the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution. All right. You will need to know what those criminal law related amendments are. I don't want you to, you don't have to be able to quote them chapter and verse, but you do need to know that it's the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, and at least some general idea of what they're about. All right, you're going to need to know what the nationalization of the Bill of Rights is. For many, many years in this country, the Bill of Rights, and specifically the criminal law related part of the Bill of Rights, 4th, 5th, 6th Amendments, only applied in federal courts. Through a series of decisions, primarily in the 1960s, those rights that were formerly only in federal courts for defendants there were extended to defendants and suspects in state courts through a whole host of decisions. That is known as the nationalization of the Bill of Rights. Okay? Instead of being available at the federal level, it was available at both the federal and now the state level. It was nationalized. All right. You will, however, note that the Bill of Rights was not totally incorporated to the states. It was what's called selectively incorporated. Selective incorporation means that it was not all of the Bill of Rights, and for our important purposes, since we're a criminal law course, it would be the 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment. And as you know, the 4th Amendment was incorporated totally, but only part of the 5th Amendment was incorporated. So what the constitutional scholars call that is selective incorporation. Most of those criminal law related amendments were extended to the state, but not all of them. Okay? If it were all of them, it would have been total incorporation, and we never had that. Okay? All right. Questions, comments, problems with any of that? All right. Finally, you're going to need to know, well, I don't know if it's finally yet, but you'll need to know what the criminal law revolution was. Be able to give me a nice little paragraph on the criminal law revolution. Basically, the criminal law revolution was in the 1960s, from 1961 to 1969, in a whole host of decisions. The Earl Warren Court, a very liberal court, extended many of those criminal law related amendments to suspects and defendants in state courts. So not just federal courts, but they were extended to defendants and suspects in state courts. Okay. Give me some questions if you got them. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, what's the difference between the criminal law revolution and the nationalization of the Bill of Rights?
Okay, it's all kind of tied together. If I ask you about the criminal law revolution, that's when all of the 4th, 5th, 6th, part of the 8th Amendment was extended to defendants in state courts. That's was called the criminal law revolution. But it was done selectively. It was not total incorporation. It's what's called selective incorporation. Let me give you an example. The 5th Amendment. It is not until about midway through the 5th Amendment that we have the part of the 5th Amendment that's extended to the states. There's this whole section where it says, no person shall be held to answer for